Hello and welcome to The Rusted Brush. Today, we'll be continuing my project on painting the uniforms of the provinces of the Empire. If you haven't seen the last video, the idea is briefly to talk about the province and kit bash and convert a model, then paint it. The province we'll be focusing on today is Stirland. This was picked by the community in the comments and the poll from the last video, so let's begin. Stirland is a rugged and poor province of the Empire, known for its rolling hills, misty forests, and deep superstition. It's located in the southeastern part of the Empire, bordering Averlin, the Moot, Ostermark, and most notably, Sylvania. Sylvania in particular has shaped much of the history of Stirland, especially during and after the von Karstein rule. The von Karsteins were ruthless vampire warlords who sought to dominate the Empire from their cursed domain in Sylvania. I don't want to talk too much about Sylvania, as this was going to be a separate video on that province, but we'll still mention it here. The von Karstein Wars saw Stirland repeatedly invaded by undead hordes, its towns and villages devastated, and its people slaughtered or raised as undead. The province's forces fought bravely, but were overwhelmed by the sheer number and resilience of the Vampire Count's army. After Vlad and his successors were eventually defeated, Stirland reclaimed its authority over Sylvania, at least in name. Sylvania remained cursed, however, with necromantic energies lingering and undead horrors still haunting the ruins of Sylvanian settlements. Stirland never fully recovered from the wars, remaining a poor and superstitious province, where fear of vampires is deeply ingrained in the culture. Before the rise of the von Karsteins, Stirland was already a backwater province, lacking the wealth and influence of Reichland or Wissenland. The ruling electors were often overshadowed by more powerful provinces, and the land was very rural, with small villages spread across the countryside. The capital of Stirland is Verkbad, a prosperous trading town known for being the wine capital of the Empire, hot spring baths, and for its excellent inns. Despite all this, the capital is still rather backwards, as only the wealthier parts of the city have sewers, and the rest of the city leaves its waste in the gutters. Stirlanders are tough, deeply superstitious people. Life in the province is hard, with most of the villages being little more than clusters of wooden houses surrounded by farmland and pastures. Peasants work long hours for little reward, and most Stirlanders grow up fearing the creatures that lurk in the dark. The poor Stirlanders are fiercely independent and stubborn. They see themselves as hardy folk who endure hardships with grim determination. The soldiers of the Stirland bear simple arms and armor. They rely on levies and skilled huntsmen known for their deadly accuracy across the Empire. Unlike other provinces' uniforms, Stirland is rather mismatched and simple. The colors of Stirland are green and yellow, reflecting the province's rural and agrarian culture. Stirland's banner contains a skeleton sounding a hunting horn, representing a call to battle. On shields, it's common to see hunting horns or skulls with green, yellow, and black being the common colors. And that's a brief look at Stirland. So let's get making a model now. So for the model, let's go over the part list and the reason for choosing certain parts. For the body, I chose a Bretonnian archer body, as it reflects the poor, downtrodden nature of Stirland. The arms and pike are from the Wargames Atlantic Conquistador kit. The pike is a very common and cheap weapon, which fits well for Stirland. The head is from the Empire Militia kit, and I think this head with the kettle helm really fits a very grim vibe. The shield is from the Empire Soldier kit, and I feel this shield will help him look more like an Empire soldier than a Bretonnian man-at-arms. The large bag is from a pistolier's kit. With the pistol cut off, I thought this would make for a good pouch for him to carry food or belongings that he's taken from the battlefield. And lastly, I wanted to add this large spiked club to his back. This is from the Ungor's kit, and I thought it would make sense for a second weapon to be more crude and brutal than a dagger or a sword. The assembly wasn't as simple as the last videos, but it wasn't very hard either. I snipped off the arms from the body and then filed and dry-fitted many times to get the arms to fit properly to the body. Once I got the arms glued in, everything else was easy enough to glue on. I was a little worried that there may be some scale differences, but I think everything looks okay. As for the base, I wanted to paint it separate from the model so I could paint it easier. I wanted the base to represent the edge of a creek or a river. I glued a large rock and added a brass leaf from an old Citadel basin kit I had lying around. I made sure to check the model stood comfortably on the base before I continued on. I added AK neutral texture and a few more rocks as a border for the water effects later on. With that done, it's time to paint, and I started by priming the model white. I started by blocking in where the yellow is going to be. I used solid yellow speed paint in these areas. This will also help as a better undercoat for the yellow as well. I forget to record it, so I'll mention it here that I painted the yellow later on with Averlin Sunset. Next, I start painting his clothes, and unlike other soldiers, I wanted to really make the provincial colors spare and make the soldier feel a bit more poor and peasant-like, so I used a mix of Satchel Brown speed paint with Kadich and Flush for the browns on the lower parts of his clothing. His socks and neck cover were painted with Zandri dust. His brigandine was painted with AK ochre mixed with a bit of pallid bone speed paint. The pouch on his back was painted with burnished red to make it stand out a bit from the other brown colors. His club was painted with pallid bone speed paint as well. His belt was painted with desolate brown, and his pike was painted with hardened leather. I then moved on to painting his shoes and part of the shield black. Black is a fairly common color for Stirland, and I'm going to be using this as a background color for the shield. I used a mix of Black Legion contrast and AK rubber black for this. Then I moved on to painting greens on parts of his sleeves, patches, and the stripes on the shield. For this I used Vallejo bright green, and now the model was starting to look like a soldier from Stirland. All the metal bits were then painted with AK gunmetal. I wanted the metal to look fairly rough, and I liked the darker tone of this metal. Then it was time for enamel washes, but before I apply any, I used a matte varnish first. Then I used AK enamel rust streaks over the whole model, and then I wipe away with white spirits. I then do the same thing with AK interior streaking effects. Then I started stippling on AK leather brown on the skirt to highlight it. I highlighted his brigandine with AK ochre. His club was then painted with Ricard flesh. The pouch was highlighted with a mix of AK medium rust and Vallejo ivory. The yellow was highlighted with a mix of Averland sunset and ice yellow, and I really like how the yellow turned out. The wood on the pike was painted with XV88. Then to make the metal look more worn, I used AK natural steel on the edges and added some random scratches to the helmet. I moved on to the flesh and used Cadian flesh tone to start with the flesh. I wanted the metal to look a bit more rough and rusted, so I applied AK rust streaks into the crevices and wiped away any excess with white spirits. I painted the stitching on the patches of his clothes with Vallejo ivory. Now the model was almost done. I wanted to add a bit of mud, so I first made a bit of a wash with AK wet ground thinned down with water and applied it on the lower parts of the model. Then I got a bit of foam and used this to make a splattering effect with AK mud on the shield. And lastly, I apply a wash of Crusader skin on the flesh, and that was the model done. So let's go over painting the base now. For the base, I started by painting the rocks with a different grey, like Gravelord Grey with a mix of uniform grey, or Desolate Brown with different ratios, and then highlighted them with more uniform grey in that mixture. The leaf was painted with pallid bone, and then I painted the mud with AK wet ground, thinned down a bit. Once the mud dried, I dry brushed it with Ricard flesh. Then it was time to add the water effects, and for this I used AK Pacific Ocean. I just applied a small amount to make it seem shallow. It looks odd now, but when it dries, it looks great, and once it dried, I glued the model to the base, and that was it. The model came out well, and I think in the end, they do look like they come from Stirland. This model compared to the Talabic Land Soldier looks vastly different, which I'm happy about. Let me know in the comments what province you want to see next. The top 4 provinces asked for will go into a poll, and that will decide what's next. Remember to like and subscribe. Take care, everyone.